The year was 1555, and the most powerful man on the planet was crying. He wasn't crying because he had lost a war or because his treasury was empty. He was crying because he was voluntarily walking away from everything. Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, a man whose domains were so vast they said the sun never set on them, stood before a crowded hall in Brussels. He was 55 years old, his body was racked with gout, and his mind was heavy with the weight of decades of absolute rule. He leaned on the shoulder of a young Prince William of Orange, looked out at the nobility of Europe, and did something unthinkable. He gave it all back. He abdicated. He took off the crown, handed over the keys to the world, and retreated to a small remote monastery in Spain to live out his days in silence. The room was paralyzed. No one understood why a man at the peak of human achievement would choose to become a ghost. But Charles knew a secret that we have forgotten in our age of constant noise. He knew that the ultimate expression of power isn't the ability to command others, it's the ability to command yourself. He knew that the crown was a gilded cage, and the only way to be truly free was to stop being the emperor and start being a man again. We live in a world that rewards the loudest voice. We are told to build a personal brand, to make our presence known, and to dominate the conversation. We mistake volume for authority and visibility for value. But if you look closely at history, and if you look closely at the truly dangerous people in any room today, you'll notice a pattern. The most powerful person is almost always the quietest one. Why is that? Why does silence carry more weight than 1,000 speeches? To understand this, we have to look at what happens when you stop talking. When you are silent, you are no longer a participant in the frantic scramble for social status. You become an observer. While everyone else is busy trying to figure out what to say next to look smart, the silent person is actually listening. They are collecting data. They are seeing the micro-expressions, the forced smiles, and the gaps in logic that everyone else is too busy to notice. Silence is the ultimate information-gathering tool. It creates a vacuum that other people feel a desperate need to fill. They will keep talking, revealing their insecurities, their plans and their weaknesses, all because they can't handle the pressure of your stillness. Think about the last time you were in a high-stakes meeting or a heated argument. The person who loses control of their tongue first is usually the one who loses the situation. Words are like arrows. Once you let them go, you can't get them back. The silent person keeps their arrows in the quiver. They wait, they don't react, they respond. And when they do finally speak, their words have the force of a thunderclap because they haven't been diluted by an hour of meaningless chatter. This is what the Stoics called Procheeron, having your principles at hand, ready to be used but not wasted. Charles V spent his final years in the monastery of Yuste. He lived in a simple suite of rooms. He spent his days watching the clocks he collected, trying to get them all to chime at the exact same second. He failed, of course, and in that failure he found a profound irony. If he couldn't even make a dozen mechanical clocks agree, how could he have ever expected to make millions of diverse subjects in a global empire agree? He had spent his life chasing a ghost. He realized that the power he had wielded was an illusion. The only thing he actually possessed was his own soul, and he had nearly lost it in the pursuit of managing everyone else's. We are all mini-emperors today. We try to manage our empires of social media followers, professional reputations, and family dynamics. We feel the same gout of the soul that Charles felt, the inflammation of the ego, caused by too much doing and not enough being. We are terrified that if we stop speaking, if we stop posting, if we stop asserting our presence, we will disappear. We think our existence is verified by the noise we make. But the truth is the opposite. The noise is what hides the fact that we don't know who we are. I'm curious, do you think it's actually possible to be a leader in the modern world without being loud? Or has our culture changed so much that silence is now mistaken for weakness? Share your perspective in the comments. I genuinely want to know if anyone has seen a silent king succeed in today's environment. The real silent king isn't the one who has nothing to say. He's the one who has everything to say, but chooses the exact right moment to say it, or realizes that most things don't need to be said at all. He understands that every time he speaks, he is spending a piece of his authority. He is a miser with his words and a spendthrift with his attention. He doesn't need you to know he's the most powerful person in the room. He already knows it, and that's why he's comfortable letting you do all the talking. When Charles V died in that monastery, he wasn't buried in his imperial robes. He was buried in a simple monk's habit. He had stripped away the layers of the emperor until only the man remained. He died with more peace than he ever had on the throne. He had learned that the highest form of success isn't being recognized by the world. It's being recognizable to yourself when the lights go out. Stop trying to be heard. Start trying to hear. The world is screaming for attention, which means the most valuable thing you can offer is your silence. It is the only thing that cannot be faked, bought, or stolen. It is the signature of a man who is no longer a slave to the opinions of others. The louder you are, the less people listen. The quieter you are, the more they lean in. In every interaction, there is a subtextual battle for dominance. We think this battle is won with clever arguments and assertive body language, but the true master knows that the most dominant move is to withhold judgment. When you speak, you are seeking agreement or validation. When you are silent, you are sufficient. You are signaling that your internal state is not dependent on the feedback loop of the room. This is a level of psychological autonomy that most people never achieve. The fear of silence is actually a fear of the self. When the noise stops, the internal monologue becomes deafening. For most people, that monologue is a series of accusations and anxieties, so they keep talking to drown it out. The silent king has done the work to make peace with that internal voice. He isn't afraid of the quiet because he likes the person he finds there. He doesn't need the world to tell him he's okay because he's already reached that verdict in the courtroom of his own mind. Think of the emperor archetype not as a historical figure, but as your own ego. Your ego wants to conquer every conversation. It wants to win every point. It wants to be the sun that the room revolves around. But the more you feed the emperor, the more he demands. He becomes a tyrant that keeps you in a state of perpetual anxiety. True freedom begins when you abdicate that role. When you decide that you don't need to be the sun, you can just be the sky, the vast silent background in which everything else happens. Charles V spent decades trying to force a religious and political unity on Europe. He believed that if he could just get the right laws in place or win the right battles, everything would be perfect. He was a micromanager of history. It was only when he gave up that control that he realized the world continues to spin just fine without him. This is the ultimate lesson of the silent king. The world doesn't need your management. It needs your presence. When you enter a room, ask yourself, am I here to prove something, or am I here to perceive something? If you are there to prove, you are a servant to your ego. If you are there to perceive, you are a master of your environment. Perception requires silence. It requires the humility to realize that you might not have the most important thing to say. And paradoxically, that humility is what creates the aura of power that people are naturally drawn to. We often mistake silence for emptiness, but silence is full. It is full of potential, full of observation, and full of the strength required to wait. In a world of fast food opinions and 24-hour outrage, the man who can wait for the truth to reveal itself is the most dangerous man of all. He cannot be manipulated because he doesn't react to the first draft of reality. He waits for the final edit. The transition to silence isn't an overnight process. It's a stripping away of habits. It starts with the realization that 90% of what we say is purely for the purpose of maintaining our social image. If you remove that 90%, you are left with the 10% that actually carries weight. You become a person of substance. Your words become rare commodities, and their value skyrockets. Charles V died at age 58, having lived more lives in those final few years of silence than in his entire reign. He was no longer the man who ruled the world. He was the man who had finally mastered the only territory that matters, the space behind his own eyes. He had found the kingdom within. This is the path of the silent king. It is not a path of withdrawal, but a path of concentrated engagement. It is the choice to be the eye of the hurricane rather than the debris being tossed around by it. It is the realization that the most powerful thing you can do is stand perfectly still while everyone else is running. You have the crown, you have the monastery. Which one are you choosing today? The weight of the crown is nothing compared to the gravity of a man who is at peace in the dark. If you're the one this is for, you know it. The world is waiting for you to stop talking so it can finally hear you.